Today we're going to learn all about quilting. This is free motion quilting. This is a pattern called a meander, or sometimes called a stipple. And it's basically just moving about your quilt in a very random way. It's my favorite way to quilt.
Today I'm going to show you how to free motion quilt, and we're going to do a very basic stipple or meander. I like to call it a meander, but a lot of people call it a stipple, and it basically means just kind of wiggling our way all the way across the quilt. The more quilting that you put in your quilt, the stronger it is, but the less quilting you put in your quilt, the soft and flowy it is. So I kind of like to stay in the middle of those two. So here is my machine. Almost any new sewing machine that you buy is going to be able to free motion quilt. And free motion quilt means to drop the feed dogs. I'm sure you remember. There's your feed dogs, and then when I press this button to the side, they drop down. And the purpose of that is to allow me to move my quilt across my sewing machine in any direction I want to. Normally when you're sewing, the machine is drawing your fabric back. You know how it does? It moves it for you. But when you drop that feed dog, it will not move it for you. You are in charge of moving it. So you want to go ahead and drop your feed dog, and you also want to go ahead and put your open-toed foot. They look a lot different on different machines, but it's basically a little circle. Sometimes it's called a darning foot, an open-toed foot. It's got a lot of different names. But you want that foot on, and you want your feed dogs dropped. If you do not know how to do your machine, look it up in your manual. Alright, so what you want to do is you want to find the corner of your quilt. I like to choose the right top corner. So top right corner, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop my presser foot and press my needle up down button. You may have a manual machine, and if you do, you're just going to push your needle down into your quilt, and then when you bring it back up, pick up your presser foot, and you're going to pull on this top thread. And when you do that, your bottom thread is going to come right up out of there. You're going to grab it and then pull it through all the way to the top of your quilt. So you'll have both threads coming out your quilt top. Now you're going to drop your presser foot, and you're going to put a couple of stitches right there in that one spot, and that's going to secure your stitches. You may move it back and forth just a smidgen just to lock that in. I like to go ahead and cut this thread. So let me let you see my setup. My needle is inside my quilt. We're going to be traveling from this corner towards the middle of our quilt, and then all the way down to that bottom right corner. So I've got the bottom right corner and that whole right side of my quilt top kind of in my lap. The left side I've got just spread out on my table like this. You don't want it hanging off your table too much because it'll weigh on your machine and you won't be able to move it as easily when you're quilting. The only part of the quilt that needs to be smoothed down is the part that's sitting right on top of this tray right here for me to quilt on. If your machine looks different, be the part that is right up under the needle. Everything else can be wrinkled and thrown to the side. So I'm going to hold with both of my hands, and I'm going to start quilting. So I've got my hands here. I'm going to push down on my foot control, and then the needle's going to start moving, and I'm just going to move my quilt. And I'm just moving my quilt into little wiggly lines. It really doesn't matter what the pattern you're choosing in. You're just going all over your quilt. So this is what this kind of looks like, and I'm going to show you the other view in just a second, but I'm just moving around. If you don't move your quilt top, you will end up with a bunch of little stitches right there in one spot. So keep moving. So the first time you do this, it is not going to be this smooth. If it looks smooth, it's not smooth at all. It's janky, and you don't know what you're doing, and you're going to make it mess up, and it's not going to be perfect. And just go ahead and expect imperfection, because that's what you're going to get the first time you do this. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. It really does take practice, and it really does become second nature to you One thing to keep in mind is this is just the quilting on top of it. Use a light colored thread, and then if you mess up, just let your mistakes be in the quilt. Those mistakes are perfectly fine. That most people won't even notice it when they look at your quilt. Only you will notice your mistakes. So go ahead and get that monkey off of your back, and don't be so hard on yourself. You're gonna mess up. You're learning. It's okay. I'm just moving the quilt. I'm just kind of sticking close to my stitches that I've already made, and at the same time I'm working myself towards the middle and down the quilt. You are going to have to stop and adjust constantly. So I smooth out the part that's right up under my needle, and then I go again. So you can see it falling all in my way. And then I just adjust. The closer you get to the middle, the more, a little bit more difficult. The bigger throat space you have on your machine right here, the better. If you're working with a little tiny throat, it's no wonder that you're going to be having trouble. The bigger throat you have, the easier it goes. Once I get towards the middle, I don't want to go no further than the very middle of my quilt, because I'm going to do the other half of this middle when I come back up, and you're going to see me do that. I'm always keeping my stitches close together. When I say close together, I'm not going to run off down here with my stitches on a rampage. You see these stitches right here? I want to stay fairly close to those stitches like that. That way I don't forget to quilt a part of the quilt or leave a big huge gap in my quilting. See, tiny mistake. I don't know if you can see that, but you know, you just go with it. You're never gonna have a perfect quilt, so don't be trying to get perfection. We're just trying to do this job well. Don't expect perfection. See, I've almost got myself in a little bit of a trap here, and I'm just gonna work my way back out of it. Just like that. I'm on the edge of my quilt top here, so I just want to not run off of it. So just like that. I'm going to show you from this angle for a little bit too. So you can see how the closer I get to the very center of my quilt, the more we get a bunch here. And I'm just constantly smoothing out, just like this. I maneuver my quilt where I need it to be, I smooth this part out, and then I just keep starting again. So I'm going to keep doing this, and I'm going to work my way to the bottom right corner. When I get to the bottom right corner, I'm going to stop and show you that part. So I'm almost at this corner. Watch me get there. So I get right to the corner, and then I'm actually going to start heading down this way. But before I do that, I'm going to take my quilt, I'm going to rotate it all the way around. And now I've got the bottom part of the quilt. So the other corner, the left-hand bottom corner, is now in my lap. And now I'm going this way. So I'm going to continue on going that. When I get to the bottom left-hand corner, then I'm going to pivot again, and then I'm going to go up to the very top of my quilt. You just keep going and going and going until your whole quilt is filled with those little squiggly lines. Okay, so I've ran out of bobbin. If you run out of bobbin thread or top thread, either one, or maybe you broke a needle, broke your thread, whatever reason, and have to stop and need to redo, you just lift up. I like to leave this string in until I actually change my bobbin. I'll go through the motions of changing your bobbin, and I've got my bobbin in there. So now I'm going to cut this thread, and the reason I waited is because sometimes I may leave and come back and lose the place I stopped at. Keeping it attached just helps me know where I've left off at. So I'm just going to cut that, and I'm going to cut any little loose threads as well. Then I'm going to put my needle, drop my presser foot, and I like to put my needle in maybe 2 or 3 stitches before it ran out. I'm going to start the same way I started when we first started quilting, which is to drop my needle, pick it back up, pull up that bottom bobbin thread, and pull it through your quilt top. And then I'm going to go and secure my stitches by stitching in a few places and even moving my quilt around a little bit just to make it extra secure. Then I'm going to start quilting. Then I'm going to go back to where it left off, and I'm going to cut the thread flush with the quilt top. So you can see this is where I left off at. Just like that. Just to make sure that we're both on the same page. The white is my quilt top. And I start quilting right here. And this is what I'm doing. And I'm working my way down, covering all the quilt top. But I'm also working myself towards the middle. Just like this. And this is pretty much the design that I always do on my quilts. Try to avoid points. When I get to this corner, I pivot my quilt. And then I'm going this way. And I'm never going off in left field. I'm always staying pretty fairly close to my stitches that I've already done. I get to this corner, I pivot again. And this is how I'm doing it, working my way all the way around the quilt. It looks much prettier in thread. and then I run it off the edge of the quilt. That's what you're doing. And it's pretty much the design. It's pretty, like I said, it's prettier when it is on a quilt, and it's just something that binds the quilt together. You can always take your time and do special designs on special blocks. I try to use the quilting as like a type of therapy where I just sit there and just make these little squiggly lines all over the place. I've got headphones in my ear, I'm listening to a podcast or an audio book, and I just zone out. I've put all this hard work into the piecing of the quilt and the basting of the quilt, and now I just want to relax and enjoy it. Anyway, this is my absolute favorite way to quilt. It's relaxing. It makes the quilt really, really pretty. It's good enough for me. Okay, so we finished quilting and we got to do a little bit of prep work before we are ready to bind. And I'm just going to take my ruler and my rotary cutter. I'm going to line up my ruler flush with my quilt top. And then I'm just going to cut the extra batting and backing away. Just like that. And I'm going to go around and do this all the way around the quilt.